All right, so today we have the pleasure of listening to Kirt Manwaring. Is that how you would say it, Kirt?
Yeah, Manwaring.
Manwaring, gotcha. Okay, so he's got a little snippet here that I'm going to share. Hello, I'm Kirt Manwaring. I'm opinionated, quirky, slightly awkward, and totally blind since birth. I've learned the way society treats my blindness is much more disabling than blindness itself. Through my work with cross-disability organizations like the Legislative Coalition for People with Disabilities and Utah's Disabled Rights Action Committee, I've learned my experience is far from unique. Come learn how well-intentioned prejudice is often most difficult to overcome and how your natural desire to relate may be keeping you from real empathy. All questions are welcome. So without further ado, let's welcome up here Kirt Manwaring.
Okay, where am I going from?
You're right up here. And then that's your mic if you want to use it, or you can just yell at the crowd, either way.
All right. Cool. How's it going, everybody? You all look great. All right. So, I wanted to, first of all, thank David and everyone who put this event together. I know it's not easy. I think the wonderful musical entertainment definitely did a great job of getting me in the right mindset for us today. So, as my bio said, I am totally blind, have been since birth, and I at first thought that was much more of a unique experience than it really is. But as it so happens, as humans, we're not very good at understanding people who are different than us, for whatever reason. And paradoxically, I think it's because we try and put ourselves in their situation without having all the data and all the facts. So, the first takeaway I want you to go away with from here is that you can relate and understand people. I'm not saying you can't do that, but there's a paradox in that if you really want to understand another human's experience, disability or not, but I'm coming at it from that lens, the first step is realizing you can't understand. Then you understand more when you realize it's impossible. It's a weird paradox. But that's definitely what I've learned in my life, is assuming you don't know as much as you do from the start. And also, prejudice does not have to be derogatory or based in hate. Most of the prejudice I and other people with disabilities experience tends to actually be meant well, in the sense that people really do want to help. People really do, for the most part, want to make our lives better. There are just a lot of assumptions that are so inherent in our experiences in society that get in the way of us doing that. And one of those assumptions has to do with this idea that's called in disability circles inspiration porn. And what that is I'm your hero, I'm inspiring, I am the reason you get up in the morning because you see me cross the street, or tie my shoes, or find the soap dispenser in the bathroom. These are all situations where I have had complete strangers come up to me and say something to the effect of, "Wow, you can do this. I take so much for granted in my own life. You're amazing." Or, I find the elevator in my work. Somebody with a wheelchair is able to go to work. And people say, "That's inspiring, that's incredible, Well, at the root of that is actually a lot of prejudice, because if you think that someone with a disability doing something that commonplace is such a noteworthy thing, what does that really say about your expectations? So that's the first main takeaway. And now that's not to say that there aren't challenges with disability. There are. I had to do a lot of work to, for example, learn how to cross streets, learn how to, live independently, that kind of thing. I had to learn other ways of doing it because society isn't built around doing that as a blind person or a person with any disability, visible or otherwise. But if I should be applauded for anything, it's the fact that I did that work like any other human does in their life to deal with the challenges they're dealing with to the best of their ability, which they tend to know better than other people what their challenges are, what their limitations are, and the most effective way to deal with those. So I'm not suggesting empathy is bad, but I want to distinguish between two types of empathy that I'm going to call contextual empathy and imaginative empathy. When I say contextual empathy, I'm talking about looking at someone with curiosity and saying, oh, I wonder what it's like for them. That's not what most people do, in my experience. What most people do is say, wow, I can't imagine what this would be like for me. And that's what I call imaginative empathy. The whole Atticus Finch To Kill a Mockingbird idea of you never really know a man until you walk a mile in his shoes type of empathy, making it personal to you, which is meant well, but generally less effective because you don't know what you don't know. And so, for example, oftentimes when I'm walking around in any kind of a business or professional environment and there's a cord on the floor, people will absolutely freak out and say, oh, there's a cord, you're gonna trip, are you okay? I can't think of any time in my life when I've tripped over a cord on the floor. That's not really a thing that's even a safety hazard if it's just laying on the floor. But people, I guess, tend to imagine, oh, if I was blind, how would I know it's there? When in reality, my cane would just hit it, or I'd just step over it without even realizing it was a thing. So that's something people do that isn't helpful because they're trying to be helpful from their own vantage point. Whereas, let's say I'm on a street corner and I'm trying to cross a road, a lot of times people will, and I need to be listening to cars to make sure that I'm not walking in front of traffic, right? And I'll have people either right next to me or yelling from across the street sometimes, the light changed, you can go, it's okay, it's okay. That's actually interfering with my ability to go safely. Because again, people assume, oh, this is the kind of help I need. And that's been my experience with blindness. But I've heard very similar things from my friends with other disabilities, obvious physical disabilities as well. And so I think the way to deal with that is to avoid thinking or saying something with the words, even I. And a lot of times I'll hear people say something like, oh, this building is really, really complicated. Even I struggle getting around and I can see. Or someone might say, wow, you know, this is a very long way. This is a very long trip. Even I get tired, and I don't have a wheelchair. You know, oh, I imagine this environment must be so overwhelming for you. Even I struggle with a lot of the people, and I'm not a person with autism. People say things like this all the time in an effort to be kind, when in reality it has nothing to do with you. And I find myself doing it to other people too. It's a very natural human thing to try and relate from our own experiences. But that's not always the most effective and can actually sometimes get in the way of actually being helpful. So that being said, I don't want to suggest that going out of your way to try and be a helpful, kind person is bad. Or that somehow you should just completely just assume everyone's got everything covered and leave them to their own devices, every man for themselves. No. What I am saying is ask first. And if someone says an answer different than what you're expecting, except for maybe the 1 out of 100 times, like if you're dealing with someone standing in the middle of a road and traffic stopped around them or something like that. Barring a situation like that, I would say accept the person's answer even if it seems counterintuitive to you. So if you ask if they need help and they say, no thank you, I'm okay, that doesn't actually mean, oh, I really want you to give me a ride, I'm just too polite to say so. Which is how it's how a lot of people interpret that kind of thing from me. You know, if it looks like I'm lost, sometimes I am actually lost. Sometimes I'm just using my cane to figure out where things are. And part of the process of me doing that involves like walking around with my cane and figuring out where things are. But a lot of people, you know, it looks clunky visually. And maybe it is a couple seconds more of a process. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm lost just because I backtracked a couple times. So that's just a specific example with my blindness. But I guess the biggest takeaway would be, if you want to help somebody, absolutely approach, absolutely ask. You know, there'll be the occasional jerk who's like, no, I'm okay, what are you doing? But by and large, people are nice. My problem, and most people with disabilities problem, isn't with people wanting to be helpful. It's with people not taking no for an answer or accepting an answer different than what they're expecting to hear. Because a lot of times I will maybe just need a direction or need to know where something is. And so, it's not a matter of don't be empathetic. It's a matter of be more curious first. Ask. And then from there, if you really want to relate and really want to understand, then within the bounds of proper human decency, ask questions. Really be curious. That's not something I or most people I've found resent. But empathy, real empathy, isn't about you or imagining yourself in my position. It is wanting to understand what my position is like from my point of view. And I guess that's really all I have for now. I'll open this up for questions. Anything anyone has. I don't know how long are we okay to go to, David?
You're good to do 10 minutes of questions if you want.
Cool.
And then how would you like to do the questions? Usually we have people raise hands. I don't know if that's going to be... how would you want to do it?
Okay, so you can either point at people or call on people or whatever if they raise hands, that's fine. In a group of blind people, usually people will just shout out answers, or shout out questions, but that can get chaotic, so.
I'll go first.
Sure, yeah.
Tell me about your title, Don't Take My Shoes.
Okay, so don't take my shoes, that is just because the whole empathy idea of, walk a mile in someone else's shoes, because then you'll understand their point of view, and the reality is no, they're the only one who can walk in their shoes. You can't. I can't understand what your experience is like any more than you can understand mine because I'm not you.
And what question do you wish people would ask you? To try to understand the walk.
Probably... I guess I would want people to ask, what are the biggest barriers that I face? And I don't mean that in the sense of what can I do differently, as much as I would want people to ask, what are the challenges inherent in your experience with whatever condition? But sometimes I don't. If I'm out in public and just want to read my book or listen to my music, but if someone's really in a conversation with me, I want them to ask, really, what is difficult? Or put it another way, what things do people think are difficult that really aren't?
Would you mind elaborating on those points? I'd like to...
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Sure. So, for me personally as a blind person, and this is going to be different for every blind person for one, not to mention every person with a physical disability is going to have a different answer. But for me, access to physical spaces is not as much of the challenge as access to digital information. It's pretty easy for me to get where I want to go. It's harder for me to access printed material, for example. So information is more of a barrier than space.
So would an example of that be let's say there's an event you want to go to, but you need to find the address.
Sure.
So getting there is difficult, just finding the address.
So I can find the address on, say, Google or whatever. My computer will talk to me. I also have this little computer which had my notes for the presentation I just made, which can go on the internet. So it's not so much finding the address, it's more there is a handout that the presenter gives everybody. Or there's a video that doesn't talk very much. You know, that kind of a thing.
Well, Kurt, I have a question that kind of goes along with that. It kind of, there's this meme that I've seen a lot, and you probably haven't because people don't usually transcribe their memes.
Right.
So.
It just tells me image making is
Yeah, there was an image this person posted, and everybody thought it was super inspirational. But there's this thing that basically says kind of the opposite of what you're saying, and everybody's loving it, and I think it has a point, but I like what you're saying too, so I wanted to bring it up. But basically what it says is, don't say, call me if you need anything. Say, I'm going grocery shopping later, I'll pick you up something. Or I'm gonna come clean your house or whatever. And so it's like this idea that if you say, call me if you need anything, people will just not call you because they don't want to post or whatever. So you just tell them what you're gonna do to help them. Which I see that point, but I also see what you're saying, like don't assume what they need. And I wonder if there's like a way to solve both problems. I don't know.
Maybe a way to solve both problems would be, I'm going to the store tonight. Can I pick you up anything?
Right. Or like, what kind of help do you need? Instead
Right.
of saying, call me if you need something, say, what do you need?
Right.
I'd like to help you.
And-
what do you actually need?
And I'm perfectly okay with people saying things like, oh, can I help you find what you're looking for? Oh, you seem a little lost. Or, oh, I'm going, like you said, I'm going to the store in a little bit. If you want me to get you anything, or what can I get you? The only issue I have with that is if I say, no, I'm actually good. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. And then people say, oh, well, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Are you really sure? Yeah, I'm really sure. Well, it's really not an imposition for me. Are you positive? Yes, I actually, when I said yes, I meant yes. You know, like, that's when it gets to be an issue.
Yeah.
Why do you think you could do that?
I think because in my case, people are like, oh, I can't imagine being blind. He's doing so well, this must be so difficult.
Yes.
But I could be wrong. That might be me making an assumption.
I'm wondering if it's a little bit, the guilt we have of our advantages
Yeah.
makes us feel like, I can only feel good about myself if I'm doing something for you.
Well, and the hardest thing to do, and I really love your input on this, but is it's like when someone passes away. You may be grieving that person's son, but what it brings up for us each individually is our own mortality.
Right.
And so a lot of times when a person will keep pushing, the socially acceptable thing is to say, call me if you need anything. Or then you take it one more step further and say, I'm going to the grocery store. But if they continue to push in that very moment, rather than coupling it with, well, I'll let you know when I go to the store next time. Be thinking about if there's anything you need, I'll check in with you again. That's a whole different energy than to keep pushing and saying. And so part of that has to be, I think it brings up in each of us, it's so interesting, like if you flip it around and say, you said that beautifully about our advantages. Well, guess what? What if our advantages are a disability? What if our ability to see things means we judge one another more quickly? But if you listen to a person's voice, you may hear a totally different, anyway.
I'm a very judgmental guy sometimes.
I picked up on that.
but no, I mean, you might be right, and I have no way of comparing that because I just know, it's an interesting philosophical thought, but I definitely have, and I've actually had to learn, and this comes hard to me because I am a very, when I want to do something my way, I want to do it my way, and I want to, I'm very stubborn, and I'm very much like, I'm going to find this thing, I'm going to find this thing. If I'm going to, if I want to, whatever it is I want to do, I'm going to be very much, like, invested in doing it on my terms.
So you take it as a personal challenge.
Sure.
I have a granddaughter.
Right. I've had to learn over the past few years to be more compassionate to people who are getting in the way of that, who mean well and are doing what they can to be a good person. I'm getting a little better at saying thank you first, and then saying, no, I'm okay. And it's funny how much that helps, but I've had to learn to be a little bit less judgmental of people and stop assuming like, oh, well, they think I'm incompetent, or they think, I don't know what people are thinking.
I think you said that very powerfully, that word assume. In all relationships, in all interchanges, we do a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
We jump to things. I'm hugely guilty of that. You know, I have no idea what even my husband at times is thinking, but I'll quickly, as a spouse, think, well, if I do this ahead of time, it'll get it taken care of before it becomes an issue.
Right.
Right? So we can do that in relationships a lot.
Yeah. And I think there's a balance of, if you go through life not making any assumptions, you're going to have a hard time getting anything done because you're just going to be skeptical. So there has to, yeah.
So I think you have time for one more question, and
I
then.
have a question, please.
Sure.
So, you were talking about, the kinds of questions you get and so forth, and I was really wondering, are there certain kinds of questions that you're just really tired of hearing that you would really prefer people not ask?
How long have you known sign language? or how long have you been the way that you are? You'd be surprised how much I get that one. Also, this is one, and I get tired of it, but I don't necessarily want to discourage people from asking if they're really curious, but it does get annoying, is, well, so do you just see like dark? And it's like, okay, I understand people are curious, or they ask what color's like for me. I'm like, okay, I can engage with that question, but it's almost like my civic duty to engage with that question, you know?
Thank you very much, Kirt. Round of applause.
Okay.
All right.
Where's a good place for me?
Hold on one moment, everyone. Oh, there it is.
Kirt, that's one of the things that I had wondered about was even when you have to navigate a new space, say that you are, such as today, a speaker or in other settings, maybe in your employment or something, do you appreciate if you're given kind of a lay of the land, like some criteria or guidelines, so that you're not always challenging yourself to figure it all out?
It really depends, because it's not even so much that I'm challenging myself to figure it out as much as it is, like, if I know where something is, I'll know where it is later. So I generally don't mind people giving me, like saying like, oh, you might want to go to the right here, there's a lot of stuff to look. I don't mind that at all. What I do mind is people like grabbing me and saying like, where are you trying to go?
Personal space thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.